During World War II, the Pacific Ocean became the scene of the largest aircraft carrier battles in history. Now, 80 years later, the situation in this region's heating up again, but this time it isn't the USA and Japan, but rather the USA and China. Both nation-states are building new ships, developing flotillas, and are actively working on scenarios for a possible collision with their counterparts. The appearance of Ford-class aircraft carriers represents a new round in this race. Will the Pacific become the site of a new cold and perhaps hot war between some of the strongest players on the geopolitical map? Let's figure that out in today's video. From their first appearance under the auspices of the CVN-21 program in 2004 and the keel laying in 2009, the Ford-class carriers became the quintessence of American power when they entered service in 2017. An expensive, complex experimental vessel that was a game-changer. At first glance, Ford has retained the recognizable features of its predecessors, the Nimitz-class aircraft carriers. However, hundreds of engineering and tactical innovations are hidden behind the familiar silhouette. Otherwise, this miracle of technology would not have cost American taxpayers $12.8 billion for the ship itself and another $4.7 billion for research and development work. The lead ship of the same name, the USS Gerald R. Ford CVN-78 class, has an impressive displacement of 100,000 tons and no less impressive dimensions. The length of the ship is 1,106 feet, its width of 256 feet exceeds the size of 3 football fields, and its height of 250 feet would be the envy of most multi-story buildings. This amount of space is due to the fact that the new American aircraft carriers have literally become floating cities with their own airport of sorts. After all, USS Ford is capable of transporting up to 90 aircraft, including new Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II fighters and older Boeing FA-18EF Super Hornets, C-2 Greyhound transport aircraft, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, Northrop Grumman E-2 Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft, Sikorsky SH-60 Seahawk helicopters, as well as the latest drones. This includes those that are actively being tested by the U.S. Navy and Air Force right now. Moreover, the military has no intention of limiting itself to only 90 units and is already seriously considering the prospect of transporting 100 or more aircraft on board the next Ford-class aircraft carriers. In the future, these supercarriers will also be based on the 6th-generation FA-XX fighters being developed by the U.S. Navy and its loyal wingman, CCA drones, also known as collaborative combat aircraft. The heart of the ship is 2 A-1B nuclear reactors from Bechtel, which previously designed about 80% of nuclear power plants in the United States. They replaced the Nimitz-class A-4W engines since they would not be able to cover down on Ford's ambitions to introduce the latest technological innovations, each of which would bite off a good chunk of the energy generated from it. The A-1B, with its thermal output of 700 megawatts, 25% greater than the 550-megawatt Nimitz reactors, is planned to power Ford and its systems until 2105. Ford received new catapults operating on the principle of a linear induction motor, the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, EMALS, which replaced traditional steam catapults. Thanks to EMALS, the gliders of aircraft launched from an aircraft carrier will not be subject to unnecessary stress, and the aircraft carrier itself will eliminate the need to generate and store steam, freeing up a lot of space below deck. Electromagnetic technology also increased the number of sorties per day by 25%, and reduce maintenance personnel requirements also by 25%, saving the U.S. Navy more than $4 billion over the life of the Ford class. So we sorted out the takeoff. What about landing? Advanced Arresting Gear, AAG, is responsible for this part on board new ships. The same electromagnetic technology as in the case of EMALS, but unlike the boring hydraulics, AAG uses an electrodynamic brake that generates an electric current when the aero finish cable is tensioned, converting the kinetic energy of the aircraft into electrical energy and precisely controlling the braking. The introduction of AAG was primarily aimed not so much at the F-35 or the future 6th-generation fighters of the Next-Generation Air Dominance program, but at drones whose hulls cannot always withstand the load created by the hydraulic systems of operational U.S. aircraft carriers. The most long-suffering innovation of the Ford class, perhaps, was the advanced weapon elevators. These 11 weapons elevators, moving at speeds of up to 150 feet per minute and carrying up to 24,000 pounds, were designed to quickly transport munitions on an aircraft carrier from where they're stored and assembled to the aircraft with which they'll be equipped. Thanks to them, the rearmament of an air wing could be completed in a matter of minutes and not hours, as was previously the case. However, even the careful placement of the elevators so that they would not cross any air wing traffic zones when moving did not save the engineering team from thousands of hours of overtime due to technical problems. However, today they've evolved into a fully operational, highly efficient technology worthy of an innovative ship like the Gerald R. Ford. The radar was practically inherited by the supercarrier, but not from Nimitz, but from the ambitious, futuristic Zumwalt-class destroyers. And although their development was stopped due to excessive cost, dual-band radar, DBR, created by Raytheon, has taken root well on board the lead vessel of the Ford class. It combined the AN Spy-3 multifunctional X-band radar with S-band volume search radar emitters distributed over 3 phased arrays, thereby providing radar illumination and tracking of targets at low altitude, as well as their further tracking in all weather conditions. But on subsequent Ford-class ships, starting with the CVN-79 John F. Kennedy, engineers decided to replace the DBR with the Enterprise Air Surveillance Radar, aka ESR, saving over $180 million for taxpayers. This, by the way, also influenced the price of future super aircraft carriers, reducing it from an insane $12.8 billion to a somewhat insane $11.3 billion. It's clear that cutting expenses in half, no matter how you look at it, will not work, but getting closer to the $10 billion price tag for a third or fourth ship of the class is quite possible. The Navy's FY 2025 30-year, FY 2025 to FY 2054 shipbuilding plan envisions an increase in crewed ships to 381 units, including 12 supercarriers, the lion's share of which will be the Ford class. While the U.S. Navy does not intend to reduce the original plan to build at least 10 ships of this class, but so far, excluding Gerald R. Ford, 6 of them are known: CVN-79 John F. Kennedy, CVN-80 Enterprise, CVN-81 Doris Miller, CVN-82 William J. Clinton, and also CVN-83 George W. Bush. But the main challenge for Ford will not be long-term plans, but the growing production of Chinese aircraft carriers. In conditions where your main strategic rival is developing an anti-access aerial denial, or A2AD system, the Ford super aircraft carrier becomes not just a tool, but a challenge. It must be able to operate in a zone saturated with anti-ship missiles, quickly evade attacks, organize targeted air raids, and control airspace over disputed waters. This is where China comes into play. A country that's undergone a crash course from the complete absence of an aircraft carrier fleet back in 2012 to the creation of its third aircraft carrier, the Type 003 Fujian. This ship, launched in 2022, was a breakthrough for the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy. The PRC is the first to build a fully modern aircraft carrier, comparable in size to its American counterparts, and more importantly, using the same electromagnetic technology as the Ford class. However, its length of 1,036 feet, width of 249 feet, and displacement of 80,000 tons still falls short of Ford stats. And the number of aircraft that Fujian can transport is 52 units, 40 airplanes and 12 helicopters, which is much less than the 90 units of the CVN-78. Additionally, the Chinese aircraft carrier operates on conventional energy, not nuclear, which leaves a significant problem on board in the form of fuel requirements, unlike the American super aircraft carrier. But the problems for Ford and its carrier group begin when Fujian starts using the Xi'an KJ-600 AWACS aircraft it carries. After all, this will provide the People's Liberation Army Navy Task Force with the opportunity to operate independently even far from the territory of the PRC. Although the Ford class is part of a broader system that includes satellites, drones, submarines, early warning radars, and a global network of bases, in a potential conflict over Taiwan, Chinese forces would operate from positions closer to home, which could greatly offset some of the above-mentioned U.S. advantages. While Washington uses aircraft carriers as mobile bases for power projection, Beijing increasingly views them as part of an integrated system to control nearby seas and deter external interference. These words are confirmed by the latter's ardent emphasis on the A2AD principle. China's building a multi-layered system designed to hinder and ideally completely eliminate the possibility of enemy forces in a certain area. This system includes long-range ground-based systems such as the DF-21D and DF-26, ballistic missiles that China itself markets as aircraft carrier killers. Their operational range is up to 3,100 miles and covers a large area of the western Pacific Ocean, including potential routes for U.S. carrier strike groups. At the same time, Beijing is building its own cruise missile submarines, the hypersonic weapons that have become a hit of the last decade, and Type 055 destroyers equipped with the most advanced radar systems in the Chinese fleet. Finally, let's add to this formula a network of artificial islands with fortified air bases, and we get an extremely complex scenario for the operational penetration of a U.S. aircraft carrier group into a potential conflict zone around Taiwan. As a result, even taking into account the obvious technological superiority, forward supercarriers will be forced to act extremely carefully. Although from the point of view of war experience, China faces a difficult task. It needs to simultaneously build equipment and increase experience, which the United States has for more than half a century because the Americans have operated dozens of aircraft carriers in intense conflict since the 1940s, from Korea to the Persian Gulf. In the end, all this competition is not just a dispute between two aircraft carriers. This is, in fact, a confrontation between two models of the future. And not only the naval balance, but also almost the entire security architecture of the Asia-Pacific region will depend on which of them turns out to be more stable, flexible, and more technologically dynamic. Which of these giants do you think will be stronger? Or are aircraft carriers reaching their end of life and will soon be replaced by something else? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell for more content like today's. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.